Hi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Tim Charters. I am the Reform UK candidate for Crawley, running in the elections coming up on the 4th of July.
So today, Tim, I wanted to discuss Reform's contract with you a little bit.
Okay.
So in the contract, the first thing that we are asked to do is to imagine several things. And the very first of those is to imagine smart immigration and no more small boats in the channel. Can you elaborate on those and how are Reform going to stop the boats?
So we have a 4-point plan. The first of which is to leave the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights. This gives us more control over our laws on how we can handle refugees and immigrants in general. We are then going to turn the boats back to France, that we find them in the channel. We are allowed to do this, that's fine. So 0 illegal immigrants are going to be settled in the UK. We're also setting up a new department for immigration, which is going to handle this, as a dedicated force.
So Reform also state in their contract with you that they are going to reduce the NHS waiting list. So how do they intend to do this? And is there a target that Reform are hoping to get the waiting list down to? Or
we think we can take it down to essentially 0. Of course, people are always going to be waiting for some form of treatment, but when I say 0, we're talking about not having to wait months and months for various kinds of treatment, years in many cases.
Yes.
So the main system that is going to get these waiting lists cleared are the voucher system. So if you have to wait for a certain amount of time to see a GP or get an operation, depends on exactly what the treatment that you're after is, you will get a voucher from us to go private. So straight away, if you're waiting for a long period of time, you can go to the private sector and get your treatment as quickly as the private sector can support.
At no additional cost.
No additional
yourself.
cost. No, absolutely.
Fantastic. So there has been some talk and some confusion, I think, about the idea that Reform are planning on privatising the NHS. Is that true? Are we going to have to start paying for our NHS treatment?
No. Now, the NHS does have quite a lot of involvement with the private sector already, and exact details on how that works I don't have to hand for you right now today. But no, people are not going to have to pay for treatment on the NHS. That's not the idea at all.
Fantastic. That's very good to hear. So Reform also asks us to imagine affordable and stable energy bills, which is something we've all been going without for quite some time. And with many people across the UK being forced to choose between heating and eating, how exactly are Reform planning to achieve this?
Okay, so the big con that we have been told is that renewable energy is cheaper than burning fossil fuels, oil, gas and coal. They say this lie by not counting the subsidies that are provided to green energy, which comes out of your taxes. They don't count that in the numbers when they say how much renewable energy costs. In addition, they add what's called carbon cost onto the fossil fuel burners. So it's just an arbitrary number that is added in order to fudge the statistics to make it look like renewable energy is cheaper when it actually isn't. I mean, have your energy bills gotten cheaper? We have more and more of the grid provided by wind power. Has the energy gotten cheaper?
No.
So it is obviously not true. It's not true. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the licenses to drill oil and gas here in the UK. We have plenty that we can exploit. And that will immediately or very, very quickly drop the cost of energy because it is so much cheaper. Now that will help people in the short term. And remember, cheaper energy and cheaper fuel makes everything cheaper. Even your cheese in the supermarket is going to be cheaper because it costs energy to produce everything, and then you have to ship it, and then you have to refrigerate it. And all of these bits cost energy. So you will see savings pretty much everywhere. After that, for the medium term, because we do want to keep an eye on our carbon production, we're going for what's called MNRs, modular nuclear reactors. It's a new, lovely British technology that's been invented, and they are about the size of 2 football fields, the reactors, as I've read, and they say that it will take about 2 years to build a reactor. And nuclear power produces 0 carbon. So that for the medium term will provide a hell of a lot of energy, and very, very cheaply, because nuclear energy is cheap.
But Reform believe that net zero is crippling our economy. What are Reform's plans regarding net zero?
Well, we're going to end the subsidies for a start. So that will save the taxpayer an enormous amount of money. And yeah, we're not interested in this scam because it does seem to be a scam. As I mentioned to you just a minute ago, that these extra taxes and the scheming with the numbers and the fudging of the numbers, it's just a chokehold on everyone. And the actual cost of energy is a chokehold on everyone. And like I said, it affects everything. I do want to add something else, though, with regards to the energy. So the world is not in a particularly safe place right now. You know, we've got the war in Ukraine, we've got the war in Israel, and both wars are potentially able to expand. And there's the threat from China as well. Maybe there'll be action against Taiwan. I mean, obviously, I hope that nothing gets worse. But if it does, we need to be energy independent. Back in World War II, Germany put U-boats in the Atlantic and blockaded shipping into the UK. And we had to put rationing in for food. I mean, my father got rickets from that rationing. Imagine if we weren't able to produce enough energy to keep our economy going at all, if things were shutting down. The devastation could be really quite serious. Now, I'm sure there are backups here or there to keep certain essential services running, but it will still be really severe. Now, I hope the wars don't get worse. I hope that the blockades don't happen, but it is strategically insane to not be energy independent. Not right now. Not ever, really, but certainly not now.
Better to be safe than sorry.
Yes, yeah.
So, Reform plans to move the income tax threshold so that people will not pay income tax unless they earn £20,000
That's
or
correct.
higher.
Yep.
So, how much does this save the lowest paid amongst us? What difference is this really going to make to people?
Obviously, it depends on how much you're earning, but if you are earning the £20,000 or more, it's about £1,500 a year, which is a hell of a lot of money. That's 2 really good holidays, or a lot of bills paid, and a much better lifestyle. You know, it takes people out, hopefully, out of a lot of hand-to-mouth living. Because £1,500, that's what, £120 a month? Something like that? It's just a mental calculation. Mm-hmm. That's a lot. That's a lot.
So in Reform's contract with you, you state that government spending needs a major reform. How do Reform plan to cut back on government spending?
Well, the amount of bloat that is in so many of our institutions, I won't sit here and say all, because there's really rather a lot of institutions, are bloated. And people have been talking about that since I was a child. Even when I was a child, people were saying that the NHS had too many middle managers. I don't know if you remember this yourself, but...
Yes, yeah, I do.
And it's gotten worse since then. So, 5%, £5 in every 100, needs to be saved without cutting frontline services. And part of that, we've also said that we're going to cut all the DEI programs. And they hire... I think each NHS trust has a DEI team. And I've seen the jobs that have been advertised online. Some of them are £120,000 pay packets. And then they hire lots of people in their team. That's a lot of money. And that's just DEI.
Yeah.
You know, we can make a huge amount of efficiencies, especially when we start using technology. Using technology wisely. Yeah.
So in the same vein, Reform also say that our economy needs reforming. So what are Reform's plans to improve the economy?
We need to free up small businesses paying quite so much tax. It's going to encourage them to recruit more. It's going to encourage them to produce more. It's going to, just provide more jobs, get more people off welfare and all of this. And the more you produce, the more people buy, the more people sell, the better the economy goes. That's basically the definition. Mm-hmm. So we also have sole traders that are being quite crushed under IR35.
Okay.
So we're going to lift some of these restrictions there as well and encourage people to start out on their own and do their own business. And then the benefits system also needs looking at. So we're trying to encourage people more into work. And part of that is going to be the income tax lift, which we mentioned before, making work pay. But also access to welfare. See, the welfare state is meant to be a social safety net. That's the real intent of it. So I'll give you an example that's personal to me. AI is coming. And AI is writing code. That's my job currently. And I've been using AI as an assistant in order to help write code more efficiently. If every programmer is going to be more efficient, you're going to need fewer programmers. So this is a direct risk to even my job. Mm-hmm. If I was to lose my job because of that, then I would need time to retrain. And if I've got a mortgage to pay and a family to feed, if I suddenly have no income, I could lose my house. And then you can't get back up again. Mm-hmm. You know, and an entire family could fall through the net. And it's a problem. Which is why we have the net. To say, right, we will cover your bills for a little while you get back on your feet. That's the intent. It's not meant to provide a lifestyle. So we need to make sure people are using the benefit system for its actual intent, which means face-to-face appointments for certain kinds of welfare that are given out rather than just filling in a form online. And it's important that it's used properly, just for every other taxpayer and for the economy in general. It's got to be used properly. No more exploitation.
Our criminal justice systems are also very much in need of reform. So how do Reform plan to improve these?
We are suffering, clearly, a two-tiered policing system. There are different rules for different people. Well, that needs to end. And we have made a commitment to end DEI in all state institutions, including the police. So we're going to put stop and search back up, which has been proven over and over again to be very effective. And that does mean a little bit of profiling that happens. And I know it's not very nice, but when you have a gang that's running in a certain area and they are of a certain description, funnily enough, you should match people of that certain description. I know it's not the nicest thing to say, but it is effective. It is effective. And what do you actually want? Do you want less knife crime? Or do you want to accept more knife crime, but we were all really nice about it?
I mean, I would argue that irrelevant of what race I am or am not, I would much rather that a policeman come up and stop and search me and people around me rather than risk an incident of violent assault happening in my community. And
the police officers involved need to be, dignified and polite at all times, so that it's not any kind of, so there is no actual racism involved, that you are treating people appropriately and fairly, but reality has come a-knocking, and so we have to acknowledge reality and say it also varies from area to area. Different races in different parts of the country are involved in gang crime, so it's not all targeting one race. It is actually a logical way of doing things.
And if you are following the law as you should be, then you shouldn't have anything to hide or anything to fear from stop and searches, regardless of what race or gender or demographic you fit into.
And with zero tolerance policing, it would be a short term, but it would be a shorter term thing in order to resolve the problems. So it's not like this is going to be how it is forevermore, because the crime will change. You actually catch the criminals and you put them in prison. The new prisons that we're building, by the way, 10,000 spaces. Very important. Because you may have seen that we have a bit of a revolving door prison system. People are getting arrested, they're going through the justice system, and they're out again. Suspended sentences all the time.
And people being released early due to overcrowding and...
Exactly. And we can't have that. We can't have that. Criminals need to face justice, need to face prison time. Not a slap on the wrist for some of the really severe crimes that are being committed. In addition, we are recruiting 40,000 new police officers, so we are going to have more bobbies on the beat. We're going to favour ex-military people in the leadership in order to make sure that our police force is strong. The standards are going to be higher. So we're going to have fit, strong police people able to actually tackle a criminal in the streets and deal with them. I don't know if you've seen online, but there's video after video of police being overly threatened by someone with a knife. And don't get me wrong, it's dangerous and scary, but the police have to be the ones that deal with it. They're the ones that have to tackle this problem. And so we need well-trained, strong, fit police people to deal with it.
So what are Reform's plans to help our education system and our children? There's been talk of scrapping some university fees for particular degrees such as maths and science and medicine.
Yes, so the STEM courses we're looking to get rid of the tuition fees for, but we're not going to be providing tuition fees to basket weaving. And I'm not joking. I spoke to a student just a couple of weekends ago, and I joked about lesbian underwater basket weaving as a course, and she said, that's not a joke. There is basket weaving as a degree. We really shouldn't be subsidising this. Why should the taxpayer be paying for a basket weaving degree for someone?
Indeed, what job are they going into with that degree?
Indeed. Now, if you really want to go to a basket weaving degree, okay, have fun. But it's not up to Dave the plumber to pay for it. Dave the plumber has an interest in more doctors, has an interest in more engineers. That actually helps him. Not so much the basket weavers. Sorry to all of you basket weaving degree pursuers, but that's how I see it. In addition, We are, again, removing DEI from schools. You were talking about schools, not just higher education. We have a problem where people are being indoctrinated, children are being indoctrinated into quite an anti-British outlook. So whenever we're going to talk, whenever a course is going to include something that is about something that is negative in our history, which is absolutely fine to have, for example, talking about the slave trade that happened, we're going to also put in a balance point so that you will also learn about the slave trade in the Middle East, perhaps, or wherever else it might happen to be. Just to say, you know what, this is fair to teach history. You're not trying to do a brainwashing thing. We're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to say here is balance between the education, between the different parts, and teach some of the good as well.
Because sometimes it can be portrayed that Britain were the only people that partook in certain slave issues, and obviously America as well. But it's very often the Western world that is penalised for slavery, and
Indeed.
It was something that happened worldwide.
And it was the British that ended it, and it cost an awful lot of money, and it cost an awful lot of lives. I mean, we finally paid the debt for ending slavery in 2015. That wasn't long ago, 9 years ago. Amazing. But a lot of people don't know this. And so the slave trade is still active in parts of the Middle East and Africa. It's still there. It's not here. It's not in the Western world. Or at least very, very minute underground, and it needs to be rooted out wherever it's found.
But in our schools, it's very much not taught that way.
It's not taught that way. So a better balanced education will provide a more accurate outlook on our country, on our civilization, on our culture. You don't need to feel guilty all the time. It's fine. We are a great country with a great history, and there's good and there's bad. But it's important that you know that there's good too. Otherwise people are just gonna, like they have been, they hate their own societies, and they run around and they riot at the drop of a hat.
So would it be fair to say that Reform believe that the Conservatives have bungled Brexit?
Yes.
And how do Reform intend to sort of fix the issues there?
With any kind of political action like Brexit, which is a fairly massive one, there are opportunities and there are risks. No one pretended otherwise. Now, a good government would maximise the opportunities and minimise the penalties. We've not done that at all. We haven't slashed the EU red tape, which we really wanted to do, and that holds small businesses back. If you want to open a bakery, you need to follow the legislation that is covering, Holland. Now, maybe it's good legislation, maybe it's not. But the point is, you're opening a little British bakery. Why do you have to follow these standards as well? And the paperwork is immense. It is immense. Now, some would say that's intentional. The idea of having a large amount of paperwork means you stop small businesses from starting, meaning large ones get to dominate. It prevents the competition. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that is the actual intent, because I don't know. I need to meet the people. But that is the effect. So, by slashing all of that red tape, and we've been pursuing the trade deals. That's good. We can do more. But that will help local economy for the small people, the little guy.
Britain has some of the best armed forces, arguably, in the world. While the Tories are discussing national service, how do Reform plan to strengthen and improve our defence?
So we're looking to increase defence spending to 2.5%, pretty much straight away, and then up to 3% within 6 years, I think it is. After that, we also want to improve the pay for military personnel and sort of give a lot more pride. Give a lot more pride for people serving in our armed forces. And I mentioned it many times already, getting rid of the DEI. We're trying to get an excellent military service. I don't know if you've heard the RAF mentioned that they're tired of hiring all these, quote, useless white men, unquote. Funnily enough, the recruitment goals are not met. When you're trying to insult the local population this much, they don't really want to sign up.
Yes, they're not inclined to come and join you.
Indeed. And we want to recruit 30,000 more for the army, because the army is woefully small. Hopefully, with our new sense of pride in our country, we'll be able to recruit this, and of course the salary improvements there as well. We're also reviewing the defence procurement and investing more in military technology that we have as well. And that's going to, without any kind of military service, without any kind of enforcement of this, because that's against our principles to try and force people to do this. we are looking at having a larger army, with better technology and better equipment, and a society that is proud of them. We also need to protect our veterans. We need to protect people that are, our servicemen and women, because they are getting legal cases against them which seem quite spurious. It's not the right way of doing things. There is a military police, and let those institutions work as effectively as they can. And we've got to look after our veterans. We actually do have veterans on the street while we put channel migrants in hotels. And it's an insult. It's an insult. If people know that they're going to be respected and looked after, they will join the military. Because we are a proud country, and we are excellent in our warfare.
We all know that Britain is in the midst of a housing crisis, with 3,000 people waiting on the housing register in Crawley alone. Many people have been priced out of the housing market and fear they'll never make it onto the property ladder. So what do Reform intend to do to help this crisis?
Yep. So we're going to build some more houses. Everybody says they're going to build some more houses. We're fast-tracking the licensing for brownfield sites. So we're not going to destroy our open greenery. We want to protect our countryside. With regards to people trying to find social housing, council housing, we're going to put British citizens to the front of the queue and no longer to the back. So that's going to be fairly transformational for an awful lot of families who are struggling to find a council house. And I hear over and over again, people are saying that they can't get a council house. And I've been hearing this for a decade or more. We also want to make it easier for smaller landlords to own property. This is quite important because some large companies like BlackRock and Lloyd's are involved in owning a tremendous amount of property. It sort of enforces a rental culture rather than owning your own. And sure, smaller landlords are still offering a rental option, but it's no longer dominated by large, big business. Every Englishman's home is his castle, and it's everyone's dream to own their own home. We want to make that possible. We're also looking to cut stamp duty, and there's also some new technology involved around house building so that we can get some affordable house building done quite quickly. We're going to look into that and see if that can alleviate the housing crisis as well. But I will also add, the housing crisis is also largely driven by mass immigration. 80% of the demand for new house building is taken up by immigration. So funnily enough, the youth are priced out when the demand is so high. If we manage to solve our mass immigration crisis, which we will, the demand will drop, the price will steady at least. I don't know if it will drop. Wages will increase, and your opportunities to buy a house will be severely improved.
In their contract with you, Reform state that they will promote British values, culture and identity. Why do you believe this is so important?
How long have you got? People often question what British values are, and they say it's things like, tolerance and diversity. Those are not British values. British values really are individualism and meritocracy, and we have a strong sense of fairness, justice. And that's reflected in our English common law that we have produced. That is one of our greatest exports to the world, along with the rest of our culture. And these values are really ancient, There was this guy, his name was Thomas Mallory, right? And in the 15th and 16th century, he put together a bunch of ancient stories, and people don't actually know how old they are. And he put them into a book called Le Mort d'Arthur, which is the death of Arthur. These are King Arthur's stories, and the Knights of the Round Table. And some of these knights were peasants, and they earned their place on that table through martial skill, through displays of courage and duty and sacrifice. And they earned their place there. And some of the other people on that table were lords who earned their place through martial skill and duty and courage and sacrifice. And you sat around that table and you could look at the king and tell him that he was wrong. And those stories take place in the 5th and 6th century. Can you imagine? It's 1,500 years old. The ideas of individualism and meritocracy. This isn't a story about the rich oppressing the poor or the poor being victimized. There's no hatred there. There's stories about good versus evil and how to be a good man or a good woman. And I love them. I love these values. I'm proud to be British because I uphold these values, and this is what our historical narrative has been. We need to rediscover these values, absolutely rediscover them. Search for virtues like courage, and fortitude and prudence. These are heroic ideas that we should live by. And again, mass immigration, they say it dilutes our values. It doesn't, it replaces them regionally. Because someone cannot integrate into soil and stone and steel. If you built the most English house you can imagine, and it doesn't matter what country you put it in, you put the most incredibly English place ever, and let's say a whole village, and you moved 1,000 Polish people into it, are they going to act with British values? No, they're going to be Polish. Now, that's not trying to insult Polish values at all. It's just I'm giving you an example of how moving into a house does not make you uphold those values. Touching the soil's not magic. It doesn't give you the British values. You must integrate into a people that are upholding them. And so, yes, I want to see a restoration for this. Not just for the British people, but for the immigrants who are here making their lives. And many of them do uphold them, One of my best friends is from Zimbabwe. I sponsored his citizenship. And he's a great contribution to our country, not just because, he has a job and never claims welfare and he's a nice guy, but he upholds these values. He gets it. He gets it and he wants to be a part of this narrative and he has earned his place here. I want to see everyone uphold these values. They're fantastic. Everywhere in the world that adopts this kind of mindset succeeds. And it's not just British-spawned countries that have taken these on either. Japan's doing very well, and they've had a very, very different culture and history. But, I'm no expert in Japanese culture, but they celebrate individualism and meritocracy and independence. People have their adventures and they have their lives like this, and they've become a huge success. It just goes to show values matter. Values are, I'm not going to say everything, but they count for a hell of a lot.
The total cost of Reform's pledges is £141 billion, which is significantly more than Labour's. Mm-hmm. How are Reform going to find all this money?
Well, the savings that I mentioned before, that 5% in various public services, without cutting the front end, the actual care that we get, will save us around £50 billion on its own. We're going to tell the Bank of England to stop paying quantitative easing interest to the various private banks. That's about a £30 billion saving already.
So we're already at half of the funding with just those two policies.
And there are various other bits where we're saving money as well. It's all detailed out in the contract, but it is fully costed. It's been costed for a long time, and we've got advice from the very best. The very best. So this is a fully planned out contract.
So finally, a lot of people in the UK believe that this election is already won. Even Nigel Farage has said that Labour will form the next government and Keir Starmer will be our next Prime Minister. So why should people still vote for Reform if you're not going to win?
You now have the potential to provide a different opposition to Labour. In my personal opinion, the Conservatives and the Labour are two sides of the same coin. They're the uni party. I don't know if you've heard that term before. Yes, the uni party. So when you vote for the Conservatives, you're not really actually providing an opposition. I mean, the Conservative Party have implemented a tremendous number of Labour policies in the last 14 years. It's quite worrying.
And the Conservative Party are arguably why we are currently in the position that we are in. Mass
immigration was under their watch, started by Tony Blair, but they allowed it to continue.
Cost of living crisis.
Yes, incredibly high taxes. I mean, the Conservative principles are supposed to be low taxes, high freedom, and a free population that's able to produce, and yes, less expenses. So, you would have fewer in the way of public services available. But they haven't done that. Not only have the public services failed, they've also added the high taxes. It's a failure on every front. And Labour are going to be exactly the same. So when you vote for the Conservatives, really are you providing an opposition? I don't think you are. I don't think you are at all. Reform are different. And not only are we lowercase c conservative, like the uppercase C Conservatives are not, we're also looking to make real changes in government and how our government works. Sure, we can't implement those unless we have a majority, but we are an opposition, an actual opposition Now, Reform are climbing in the polls every single day. Now, we only have 11 days left, sure, and there's an awful lot of movement to happen. But an awful lot of the country are so fed up of this two-party system. They don't trust either of them. And they have seen inspiration out of Nigel and out of Reform UK. I think they're ready to make their voices heard. I think they're ready to vote for it. And I think we may well see a much higher result in Parliament than we expect.
Yeah.
Now, sure, I might actually end up eating my hat. Because, like I said, I'm not certain of this. I'm not putting money on it. But it seems to be the case. But who knows what happens in the next 11 days?
Thank you very much for your time and taking the afternoon to answer some of these very important questions. I understand that you are in the town in your local constituency every weekend. If people do have more questions they want to ask you,
please do ask me anything. You know, we've only got one weekend left. So next Saturday and Sunday I'll be Queen Square or by Memorial Park, because next Saturday is Armed Forces Day, so we'll be out in force making an appearance and paying our respects there as well. And yeah, just grab me. Otherwise, I'm also on social media, X, Facebook and Instagram. You can also email me directly at crawley@reformuk.com. Yeah, ask me anything. I'm a very approachable person.
thank you very much, Tim.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.